Hello everyone, you're watching the channel Stories of Our Life. Friends, make yourselves comfortable. I wish you to truly enjoy listening to this life story.
It was a sunny summer day. The end of June. Summer was in full swing. To be honest, the first summer months flew by unnoticed for Stacy. Tests and exams had taken a lot of energy and time. Finally, the last exam was over, and she could breathe easy. Stacy went to medical school of her own volition. At school, her favorite subjects were biology and chemistry. Of course, she also loved her literature classes. The teacher gave interesting lessons and talked about the works so enthusiastically that it was impossible not to fall in love with literature. Stacy adored reading books. She spent all her free time in the village library. Many of her classmates preferred electronic books. Some of them even bought special gadgets that made it possible to find all the necessary literature on the internet, instead of searching for it among the shelves of the old library. The girl did not understand the point of these fancy things at all. She preferred to read real books, turning over one page after another. She could smell them, hear the whispering of the pages, stroke the covers, and sometimes even cuddle them. Especially at the end, when the most exciting moment came and it became clear that it was time to say goodbye to the next book characters. Each book opened for her a new unknown world that beckoned with its mysteries and riddles. Her life was unremarkable: school, lessons, helping her grandmother with household chores, talking with friends. It all became routine. And she wanted something new, wonderful, even magical. Her grandmother often told Stacy that she was a natural-born doctor. And there was someone who was. The girl's mother Mary worked as a surgeon in a local hospital. All the patients liked her very much for her tactfulness, professionalism, and ability to find an approach to all patients. Stacy's father, Larry, taught history at school. He, too, was said to have been a true professional. The girl remembered her parents, even though she lost them at the age of 7. One day her parents went into town and didn't return. An SUV crashed into them off the road. There was virtually nothing left of the car Mary and Larry were in. The passengers died at the scene. The perpetrator of the accident fled the scene, and the police were never able to find him. Stacy was left an orphan. Melinda's grandmother took her into her care. She noticed that her granddaughter was interested in different herbs and studying their properties. As she grew older, she mastered the massage technique on her own. Her first patient, of course, was her grandmother. The girl grew up to be kind, hardworking, and responsive. Melinda loved her granddaughter very much, did everything possible to ensure that the girl did not need anything to learn. Stacy received love and care, which she lost after the death of her parents. Grandmother Melinda and Stacy lived in a small house on the outskirts of the village of Flora. The village probably got such a beautiful name because there were many flowers blooming in the surrounding countryside during the summer. It seemed that the meadow during their blossoming turned into a sea. Such beauty enchanted everyone. The village was not far from the district center. Maybe that's why quite a lot of people lived in it. The villagers loved Melinda and her granddaughter. At the age of 15, Stacy could already give advice on what herbs to treat. She herself dried them and made her own gatherings. Some classmates laughed at her, called her old-fashioned, but Stacy paid no attention to them and lived in her comfortable world, waiting for a miracle and a fairy tale. And love as well. At the age of 16, she began to read a lot of literary works, the main characters of which suffered from love and overcame many obstacles for the sake of it. Stacy began to dream that she, too, would fall in love, and her feelings would surely be mutual. At the age of 17, Stacy enrolled in medical school. Her grandmother had to move to the city, which was far from her home village. She decided to start by becoming a nurse, and then apply to the institute and become a pediatrician. Passing another exam, the girl thought that the next step to the cherished dream had been taken. The 2-year medical college was behind her, and in front of her were 2 months of vacation. The only thing left was to pack her things, give the key to the dormitory room, and go to the village to her beloved grandmother. "Young lady, you have such a beautiful smile," a voice from nowhere interrupted Stacy's thoughts and made her stop. A handsome guy was walking along the sidewalk next to her and smiling. "I've been watching you for a long time." You walk and smile, as if you were talking to yourself. I involuntarily smiled myself. You don't often meet a girl like you. "Oh, no," said Stacy, embarrassed. "Is it forbidden to smile?" "I am glad because I passed the last exam and now I am free as a bird. My grandmother is waiting for me at home, and I will be able to see her very soon." The girl looked at the young man and could not take her eyes off of him. The tall, blue-eyed brunette looked her straight in the eyes with a gorgeous smile and seemed to want to tell her something. "May I ask where your grandmother lives?" the boy asked. "You remind me of the character in a fairy tale who really wanted to eat the old lady," Stacy joked. "Do I look like Little Red Riding Hood?" "Ah, that's the kind of hero you mean." "No, believe me, I'm not that bloodthirsty. I just don't want to lose touch with such a pretty girl. By the way, my name is Brett. How may I address you?" "Stacy," the girl whispered softly and finally managed to take her eyes off the guy. "I lived not far from here, in the medical school dormitory." "Nice to meet you, Stacy. Are you a future nurse?" "A very noble profession," said Brett. "Yes. I'll get my degree in 2 years. Actually, my dream is to be a pediatrician," she explained. "Cool. So you like kids, too?" asked Brett enthusiastically. "I've never met a girl like you." "Come on. Don't flatter me," replied the girl. The young men walked along chatting and didn't notice how quickly the time passed. "This is where I live," Stacy told her new acquaintance at the door of the dormitory. "I don't have any relatives or acquaintances in this town who can take me in. It was hard at first, but now I'm used to it. The dormitory is fun, and it's easier to prepare for classes and exams." "But I never lived in a dormitory," as if with regret said Brett. "I lived all my life with my mother and grandfather. I don't remember my dad very well. He died 12 years ago. I was 8 at the time." "I understand. I live with my grandmother for a reason, too. I was orphaned at the age of 7. You and I are similar in that," the girl sadly informed Stacy. "And when are you going to go to Grandma's? Maybe we could go for a walk tonight? And tomorrow you'll be gone. By the way, where do you have to go? You never told me." "Flora," answered the girl from beginning to smile, "that little village is far away from here. Do you know how beautiful it is there? Especially in the summer. In about 2 weeks Flora will start blooming there. Whole fields of flowers talk while they bloom. Our fields are like the sea." "It must be true, I've only seen the sea in pictures." "Great, I guess all the girls in your Flora are so beautifully romantic," suggested Brett. "I guess so," agreed Stacy. "Well, what about a walk? Would you be willing to spend tonight with me? Let's go for a walk, we'll sit in a cafe, we'll go to the movies," her new acquaintance suggested again. "All right. I'll get a ticket for tomorrow." "What time shall we meet?" agreed Stacy. "I'll meet you there at 8 p.m., said Brett, looking up into the girl's bottomless blue eyes as he realized he was drowning in them. Such beauties he had never met before. Saying goodbye to Stacy, Brett hurried to his car. His brand new Lexus was waiting for its owner in the parking lot outside the flower store. His mother had persuasively insisted that he start courting the daughter of her business partner, Riley Smith. Kimberly Smith was an enviable bride. The sole heiress of a wealthy businessman who owned a restaurant chain was a bargain for Brett. The 20-year-old had absolutely no thought of marriage. While he was only an economics student and had just begun to learn the intricacies of his mother's hospitality business. Kelly Gordon, the widow of Alexander Gordon, had been running her husband's business for 12 years. Brett's grandfather, of course, was heavily involved in the family business. He had also once started building hotels, but health problems prevented him from doing business the way he would have liked. The only hope for his mother and grandfather was Brett. It was up to him to continue the Gordons' family business, and maybe to take it to a new, more advanced level. After buying 2 bouquets of roses, the boy carelessly tossed them into the back seat of the car and headed for his mother's office. Kelly met him in a terrible mood. Brett was half an hour late and didn't answer any of her calls. The meeting with the Smiths was scheduled for 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Mother and son had only an hour to make all the arrangements. "Where have you been, Brett?" The mother pounced on her son. "I sent you out to get flowers. It's like you've been to the moon. How can you be so irresponsible? And anyway, what awful bouquets did you buy? Kimberly and her mother deserve fancier flowers. You don't think the bouquets are bad?" "They're all right," Brett began to defend himself. "I wouldn't buy them any flowers at all. Mom, you know very well that Kimberly doesn't interest me at all." "What kind of expression is that? Maybe it's your future wife. At any rate, I should like it very much. We couldn't have dreamed of a better one. Think of all the possibilities you'd get if we were related to the Smiths." "Brett, please, don't be silly. Take a good look at Kimberly," Kelly demanded, looking her son in the eye. More than anything, Brett didn't like to argue with his mother. He didn't agree with her on everything, but he knew that if she was very sure about something, it was better not to contradict her. So Brett pretended to listen to his mother, but did most of the time in his own way. "Mom, we're late for a meeting. I understand what you want me to do, but I can't promise I'll do it the way you plan," Brett replied and left the office. The meeting with the Smiths took place at Kimberly's restaurant. All of the Smiths' restaurants were named after their only daughter. Not only was Brett not interested in Kimberly, he tried to avoid her as much as possible. The girl seemed to him too spoiled, and in some places even stupid. She studied at university in management and constantly talked about how she would help her father to develop his business. In fact, she gave the impression of being a frivolous girl. Her main hobbies were brand name clothing, expensive cosmetics, and beauty salons. "Sorry to keep you waiting. Brett was busy with the new hotel business, so we had to stay late." Kelly, not knowing how best to justify herself, came up with the first thing that came to mind. "Don't worry. We know what a serious son you've raised. Make yourselves comfortable, we've already ordered for you." "We hope you'll feel good about our choice," replied Kimberly's mother. Brett modestly said hello to the Smiths and silently handed the bouquet to his daughter and her mother. Kelly gave her son a slightly stern look, hinting that she wasn't very happy with his behavior. But he pretended not to notice. During lunch, the Gordons and the Smiths discussed how business was going. Kimberly was silent and looked at Brett, showing with all her appearance that she was not in the least bit interested in the boy. Brett, on the other hand, was doing his best to let her know that he was totally indifferent to her. Kimberly was flamboyantly wearing makeup. A short form-fitting dress with a low neckline was absolutely unsuitable for a dinner at a restaurant, but apparently it was where she felt comfortable and hoped Brett would like her. The girl was proud of her long bright brown hair. She rarely braided it to emphasize its beauty. Kelly tried too hard to find common ground with the Smiths. Brett was disgusted to watch this scene, realizing that behind the outward beauty there was nothing but pretense, flattery, and lies. After barely enduring an hour and a half of conversation with the Smiths, Brett happily stepped outside for a breath of fresh air. Kelly hurried after her son to tell him once again what she thought of him. "Brett, this is just outrageous. I'm trying my best to please the Smiths. And what are you doing in the meantime?" Kelly started attacking her son. "I'm acting totally natural and uninhibited at this time. I don't want to try for people I don't feel comfortable around," Brett interrupted his mother. "I'm glad this circus is over."
Bye.
"Mom. I still have a lot of unresolved things to do." "What could you possibly have to do?" Kelly tried to reason with her son. But Brett was already far away. The boy got into the car and disappeared from his mother's sight. Stacy returned to the dormitory in a strange mood. She felt that something was happening to her, but what it was, she couldn't yet understand. After changing into comfortable home clothes, she prepared dinner. Soon Daisy, her friend, returned from work. The girls had gone to medical school together, had become friends, and supported each other in everything. Daisy had gotten a job 2 months earlier as a nurse at the local hospital. Stacy wanted to follow her example, but the hospital had no openings at the moment. "Stacy, what's wrong with you today?" Daisy asked, noticing the strange smile on her friend's face. "What kind?" "Very happy." Stacy smiled enigmatically and told her friend about her new acquaintance. Daisy listened intently and was happy for her friend. "You make sure you go out with this Brett tonight, get to know him better. Maybe he is your destiny," Daisy advised. She agreed and thought about what to wear to meet her new acquaintance. It was hot outside, even in the evenings the temperature rarely dropped below plus 25 degrees. In principle, the girl's closet was not so rich that she had to choose anything for a long time. She decided to wear a long turquoise sundress and put her hair in a bun. Looking at her reflection in the mirror, the girl smiled. "Well, I guess I'm ready," she said to herself. "I wonder if Brett is there yet? I wouldn't want to have to wait for him myself at the appointed place." It was 7:45 p.m. on the clock. When she went downstairs and looked out the window, Brett was standing outside the dorm with a bouquet of roses, staring into the distance. When he noticed Stacy at the door, he got excited, walked up to her, and gave her the flowers. The young people decided to take a walk along the promenade. Brett couldn't take his eyes off the girl's natural beauty. Stacy won him over with her gentle voice, her tinkling laugh, and the sparkle in her bottomless blue eyes. "Sorry you're leaving tomorrow," he said when it was time to say goodbye. "We've only just met, and already we have to be apart for 2 long months." "I'm going to miss you, too," she said, "but my grandmother has been waiting for me. She's been looking forward to my coming home for the vacations all year. I don't get to visit her very often." "Listen, why don't I give you a ride tomorrow and meet my grandmother?" the boy suddenly suggested. "Are you serious?" Stacy was surprised. "I don't know what to say." "It's decided. You're coming with me tomorrow." "What time do you want me to pick you up?" Brett said happily. "Let's say 9 o'clock in the morning. It'll take about 2 hours to get there." "We should be there before lunch," Stacy explained. As the girl disappeared behind the door, Brett suddenly thought about the fact that she hadn't asked him any questions about his family, and didn't know that he was the wealthy heir of the famous Gordon's family. He had met the girls several times, but each time he realized that they were more interested in his wealthy inheritance than in him. Stacy seemed to him a sincere and simple girl, so he decided not to tell her about his family just yet. He didn't want to scare her off and emphasize what different families they were born into. After some thought, the boy went to the auto shop of his former classmate Ian. Ian was surprised by Brett's sudden appearance. He only repaired inexpensive cars, so Brett was an infrequent visitor to his service station. "Hello, friend." Ian greeted his guest. "It's been a long time since you stopped by." "Sorry, mate, no time. I thought you might be able to help me, so I rushed over immediately." He explained his unexpected visit. "Brett, I urgently need a car for tomorrow. Something simple." "That's the strangest request you've ever made to me," Ian wondered. "What kind of car can I offer you? You came in a Lexus yourself." What would be considered a simple car to you?" "Stop messing with me," Brett interrupted his friend's joking monologue. "Can you do my request or not?" "No problem. Take my car." "It's nice," Ian suggested. "How great," rejoiced Brett. "That's just what I need. But let's get the insurance certificate tomorrow morning. I'll leave my Lexus with you for now." "Why are you doing this?" Ian wondered. "Are you trying to get another girl to like you?" "Almost there," smiled Brett, "so meet me tomorrow at 8 o'clock. Don't be late." The friends shook hands. The business was done. The only thing left to do was to fill out all the necessary paperwork and drive to Flora. The next morning Brett drove up to the dormitory at 9 a.m. sharp. It did not take long for Stacy to arrive. After putting the girls' things in the trunk, Brett helped Stacy into the car seat and hit the road. The navigator said it would take a little over 2 hours to get there. "Make yourself comfortable. I'll make it a breeze. I can't wait to see your beautiful village with such a romantic name." Brett was excited to spend a few days with Stacy. His mother informed him that he was leaving for the country to visit a friend of his who needed urgent help on the road. Stacy told the young man about living near her grandmother until she was 16. And the man who caused your parents' death was never found, wondered Brett. No, Grandma says it was probably a very rich man and he was able to pay off the justice system. She still can't forgive this strange driver for killing my parents, explained Stacy. I see. She might be right, Brett agreed with the girl. Stacy, do you think your grandmother will like me? I think so. Grandma always said she wanted someone smart and simple and dependable around me. You give the impression of being just that. The time flew by while we were talking. To get to the village, we had to turn off the main road and onto a secondary road. The dirt road led through the forest, then, through the field behind the hill the first houses were seen. My house is the last one at the other end of the village, Stacy explained, and she noticed the curiosity of the Flora villagers at the unfamiliar car. The silver car drove pompously down the street and stopped in front of a small wooden house. This is where my grandmother and I live, Stacy said cheerfully and deftly jumped out of the car. An old gray-haired woman was already walking toward her. The grandmother and her granddaughter embraced and looked at each other lovingly. Grandma, how I missed you, said Stacy cheerfully. Meet my friend Brett. He decided to bring me to you for the vacations, and at the same time to meet you. Upon hearing her granddaughter's words, the older woman looked at the boy with an intriguing look. Brett thought for a moment that she could see right through him. Brett, you say? Granny said thoughtfully, well, let's get acquainted, now that you're here. I'm Melinda. She stepped closer to Brett, looking him in the eye. She looked him in the eye, and he thought she was trying to find out if she could trust him. My Stacy is an unusual girl, trusting and simple. You, young man, I hope you understand that. Will you be here long? Inquired Melinda. As it happens. I'll probably stay with you for a couple of days. And then I'll go back to town, answered Brett. Okay, let's go inside. I've already set the table, he said, and it was surprisingly cozy and cool inside the old house. It was a place to take a break from the midday heat. Walking across the creaky floor, Stacy and Brett entered the kitchen. There was an electric samovar on the table, smelling of mint and other aromatic herbs. After cleaning themselves up from the road, the young men sat down at the table. Grandma, I haven't eaten your pies for so long, said Stacy, with an appetite taking a bite, and I'm not even talking about the soup. Praise, praise, granddaughter, smiled Melinda, and you, my dear guest, eat too. We have all our own natural food here. I'll have to run to my neighbor's house tonight for some milk. I haven't kept my own cow for several years now, my health doesn't allow it. Did you keep a cow, too? Wondered Brett. Of course. Stacy wouldn't lie. We used to make hay all summer. Remember, granddaughter? Stacy nodded her head in agreement, finishing her second cabbage pie. I'm more afraid than anything that I'll die and leave my Stacy alone. I dream that by her side was a real man, able to protect and intercede, if necessary, shared her cherished dream Melinda. And in your city, can you find such? A poor, but dependable groom. Wealth spoils people more often than not. I don't trust rich people who think they can buy everything in this life. Do you agree with me, young man? Brett felt Melinda's words send shivers down his body. He realized that he had done the right thing in not admitting to Stacy what a rich heir he was. He should have entered the trust first and only then revealed the whole truth about himself to them. Of course, at first glance it might have seemed like cheating and not worth doing. But so far Brett seemed to think he was doing the right thing. Yes, I think so, too, he answered quietly and averted his gaze from the older woman's nagging eyes. For some reason Brett thought at that moment that Melinda must have been wronged by someone from a wealthy family when she was young. Otherwise, why would she have reacted in such a way to a question about the status of her granddaughter's future groom? After lunch, Stacy took Brett to the river. They sat on the bank and breathed in the fresh, herb-scented air. I love my village, Stacy confessed. If it were possible, I wouldn't go anywhere. I'm going to study to be a doctor, and I'll come back to live here. But there are more opportunities in the city, a job in a good clinic, for example, and prove yourself as an excellent specialist there. Yes, I agree. But there are also people living in the countryside. They also need the services of good doctors, objected Stacy. I am a child fond of herbs. I know at what time they need to collect, so they had time to absorb all the power and become the most useful. Some clues were given to me by grandmother, and then I myself began to understand a lot. Sometimes it seems that I have an inner voice telling me which decoction of what herbs should be recommended to this or that person. It is very interesting. You talk about amazing things. Brett took the girl's hand. You are amazing yourself, Stacy. I've never met anyone like you. They stayed on the beach for a long time, discussing many subjects. They did not come home until late in the evening. It was clear from the look on Melinda's face that she was not seriously nervous and was looking forward to them. Dinner is ready. Where have you been? She asked as she poured the soup onto plates. I lost you. I didn't know what to think. A neighbor came, wondering who that young man came with Stacy. People in our village like to gossip too much. You, Brett, are their main target now. Everybody thinks you're Stacy's groom. Well, I'm not denying it. I like your granddaughter very much, tried to justify himself. You're not talking about marriage too soon, Melinda interrupted. You two haven't even gotten to know each other yet. And you already think you're her groom. You shouldn't be in such a hurry. What am I supposed to do? People won't stop talking about me and Stacy, Brett said. You should go away, said the old lady, and the vacations will fly by. Stacy will be back in town in September. You'll see her there. You'll see if you want her or not. Who knows, maybe in the meantime you'll find someone else. What are you talking about, Grandma? Melinda and Brett Stacy interjected. I've been around longer, and I know what I'm talking about, the woman replied and left the room. Stacy looked at Brett in silence and didn't know what to say. The boy was silent too. They didn't understand why the grandmother was treating their relationship this way. Stacy, I guess your grandmother is right. I should go away, and you and I will definitely meet again in September. We'll talk on the phone for now. Just promise you'll call me every day, Brett said to the girl. Of course, I'll look forward to seeing you again. After dinner, Brett started the car, said good
Bye
to Stacy and Melinda, and drove into town. The girl was a little angry with her grandmother. She had hoped that Brett would stay with them for a couple of days, but Melinda made it clear to him that he shouldn't. And don't give me that look, the older woman suddenly turned to her granddaughter. Tell me, how many days have you known her? 3 to 4? A week? I met him yesterday, Stacy admitted honestly, but I think Brett is a wonderful man, honest and kind and noble. Yesterday? I thought so. I've lived my life, Stacy, and I know that before you get involved with young people you have to get to know them better, to look at them. Neither you nor I know who this guy is. If he waits for you, you'll keep in touch with him. If not, he wasn't serious about you. If he could stay here for a few days, we'd get to know each other better, she tried to explain her point of view. We don't need gossip, the grandmother interrupted her granddaughter. Tell everyone that he was a friend of yours who just decided to give you a ride because he was on his way. Okay, Stacy agreed. Grandma, I get the feeling that you don't tell me much about yourself. As if you've experienced something like this before and are now trying to warn me against a mistake you once made yourself. Hearing her granddaughter's suggestion, Melinda, in order not to give herself away, turned away to the closet and pretended to look for something. Don't make this up, Stacy, she answered quietly. Nothing of the kind has ever happened in my life. I just don't want this guy to hurt you. Though Melinda tried to hide her mood from her granddaughter, Stacy's inquisitive eyes couldn't help noticing how her grandmother's hands shook nervously from the memories she couldn't yet share. The 2 months of summer flew by unnoticed. At the end of August, Stacy and Grandma decided to start making apple jam. This summer there were more apples than ever before. Did you stay up till midnight again? Talking on the phone again? Melinda said, as if to herself, rattling the glass jars. And why didn't you sleep? Grandma, you know Brett calls me every day, she said. I can't believe I'm going to see him in a week. You can't wait to get away from me. You're bored with me, sighed Melinda. Don't say that, Grandma. I have no time to be bored with you. In a couple of weeks, I'll visit you again for the weekend. I won't leave you alone for long, Stacy tried to reassure her. Melinda smiled at her granddaughter, took one of the jars in her hands, and dropped it on the floor. She didn't immediately realize what had happened. The girl thought her grandmother had accidentally dropped it, but when she saw her bend unnaturally and take hold of her heart, she immediately called an ambulance. With difficulty, she laid the elderly woman on the couch and waited impatiently for the doctors to arrive. 20 minutes later, the ambulance parked at the gate of their house. The doctor examined Melinda and shook his head. Your grandmother has most likely had a heart attack. She must be admitted to the hospital immediately. Having gathered everything, Stacy got into the ambulance and drove with her grandmother to the hospital. The girl was very nervous. She tried to keep the bad thoughts out of her head, but they crept into her head without asking. The terrible diagnosis, thank God, was not confirmed. Help was provided in time, but the woman's condition left much to be desired. Stacy returned to Flora for only a few days. 3 days later, she was sent to the city hospital for an examination. Stacy got the rest of her chores done and left. Immediately after arriving in town, the girl went to the hospital. Melinda greeted her granddaughter with joy. Stacy. Here you are. How is my home? Is everything all right? The old woman worried. Everything is fine. Grandma, don't worry. Our neighbor promised to take care of your household, so everything is fine. The main thing now, your health. After seeing Grandma, Stacy decided to talk to her doctor. Hello, Stacy greeted the doctor. How's my grandmother? Are you Melinda's granddaughter? She told me so much about you that I recognized you immediately. I'll be honest with you, your grandmother isn't doing as well as I'd like. The fact is, her heart is very weak. She needs an operation as soon as possible, but it will cost money. Do you have any way to pay for the operation as soon as possible? How much are we talking about? Inquired Stacy, knowing that she had no money at present. When the doctor voiced the amount needed, the girl realized that she urgently needed to find a job. Where to find a job, she did not know yet. On her first date with Brett after the long summer separation, Stacy came sad. She was glad to see him, of course, but the thought of her grandmother was weighing on her mind. Stacy, how I missed you, a happy Brett whirled the girl around. You have become even more beautiful in these 2 months, tanned, rested. That's what fresh country air means. Brett, I am very glad to meet you, too. I've been looking forward to the day when I could see you again, confessed Stacy, and cried. The boy did not know how to comfort her. After calming down a little, the girl told him all that had happened. Brett, do you know where I could get a job? Sure, I could get a job as a hospital nurse, but with such a small salary I won't be able to make enough money for the surgery over the winter, Stacy said. Don't worry, we'll think of something, Brett tried to reassure her. I can pay part of it. I worked all summer for nothing, didn't I? You didn't tell me you got a summer job, Stacy wondered.
Yeah.
I didn't tell you. I just thought the time would fly by a lot faster with work, Brett explained to her. He did work, but he didn't yet know how to tell Stacy that he worked in his mother's office, helping her in the construction business. By his 20s he was getting pretty good at it and was almost ready to take matters into his own hands, but Kelly insisted that she wouldn't give him his place completely until after he got his college degree. What was your job? Tell me. Or is it a secret? The girl inquired. Why a secret? I got a job in a small firm and I ran various errands. It wouldn't interest you. Tell me again about your grandmother. What does it take, and in what time frame? Brett tried to move the conversation to another topic. The evening flew by unnoticed. Tomorrow they decided to start looking for a job for Annie. On returning home, Brett noticed that their mother had had another accident. Mom, what's wrong with you? Is there a problem at work? He turned to her. Problems all around. If only at work. I was at your grandfather's today. You know, this is the first time I've changed his nurse. Another one quit today. They're not happy with the pay. By the way, not a single nurse in the clinic gets that kind of money, and they don't get enough. I understand the work is difficult. I have to constantly monitor his condition, to change the linen to clean. And what else is there? But the money has to be earned. Don't you think so? The caregiver quit, asked Brett, and then he thought about offering the position to Stacy. I know a medical student I know. It would be nice to get her a job as a nurse for Grandpa, the boy suggested to his mother. A student. So she won't ask for a raise? Kelly asked. I really don't feel like spending money. Frankly, I don't believe your grandfather will ever be able to talk or understand anything at all anymore. Don't say that, Brett interrupted her. Grandpa's still alive, so we have to do everything we can to make him well. Only there's a problem. This girl is studying and will only be able to work in the evening. All right, have her come in for an interview at the hospital by 9 a.m. I will get to know her and give her all the necessary references. Ella will work in the morning. She's not going to quit yet, thank goodness. Brett was glad he could find Stacy a job. He had no doubt that her mother would take her on as a nurse for her grandfather. The boy realized a long time ago that his mother had kept Grandpa in the hospital for 2 years simply because many people knew him as a fine man and a great businessman. Much of Kelly's life held on to Gordon Sr.'s reputation, so the woman could not allow rumors that he was not being properly cared for. After talking to her mother, Brett called Stacy and warned her that he had found her a good job. He said she was expected at the hospital in the morning, but he did not say anything about the fact that the girl was to be his own grandfather's nurse. Brett decided not only to help the girl earn extra money, but also to see if she could find common ground with his mother. The guy hoped that Stacy would like Kelly and she wouldn't oppose their relationship in the future. The next day Stacy arrived at the hospital early in the morning. As it turned out, she was to work at the same clinic where her grandmother was being examined. Kelly met Stacy in a bad mood. She was a smart woman, but she was much more comfortable living behind a strong and successful man and not thinking about anything but beauty salons and vacations on the ocean. In 2 years she had grown weary of running a hotel business, and she was anxious to marry her son and become related to the Smiths. She thought it was the only way to ensure a secure and peaceful future for herself and her son. But Brett was still too young. Kelly didn't want to have to deal with her late husband's father. Good afternoon. I'm Stacy, the girl said timidly as she entered the room, where she was greeted by 2 women, Kelly and the nurse Ella. On the bed lay an old man who, by all appearances, she would have to take care of. Stacy, you've come at last, Kelly said, as if reproachfully, though Stacy arrived exactly on time, not a minute late. My name is Kelly. I'm told you're getting a medical degree. You will have to take care of my father-in-law. He hasn't gotten out of bed in 2 years, doesn't speak, and is unlikely to ever fully recover. The doctors don't give any rosy prognosis, but we haven't given up hope. Yes, I'm a third-year medical student. Of course, I've never had to work as a nurse before, but I think I can handle my duties, said Stacy as confidently as possible. That's fine. Ella will explain to you what your job will be, but in the meantime, please read the contract and sign it. It says everything you'll be responsible for and your salary, Kelly explained. After reviewing the documents, Stacy agreed to the terms spelled out in the contract. She was also happy about the salary, which would enable her to cover her grandmother's medical expenses. I understand the terms of the contract, she said, turning to the last page. When should I start work? Today. You will work from 3 to 8 p.m. The rest of the time Ella will look after Harris. Just please always be on time and don't keep Ella at work. She will now explain exactly what needs to be done and I have to leave. Sign the papers and leave them here. I'll get them when I get back, Kelly said and left the room. The nurse, Ella, explained to Stacy everything that was the caregiver's job. The girl had to administer several IVs, wash the patient, change the bedclothes daily, monitor the connected machines, and do many other jobs. Harris has not risen from his bed and has not responded to anything for 2 years. In spite of his advanced age, he was a very active man. He was into mountain climbing. That was the source of all his troubles. The first time he was seriously injured was when he was 30 years old. Then they were able to save him and get him back on his feet. Gordon stayed away from the mountains for several years, trying to forget about his dangerous hobby, but the passion proved stronger. Soon he forgot all that had happened and climbed the mountains again, no longer a young man. He risked climbing one peak after another. He thought there was no mountain he could not conquer, but he miscalculated in his calculations. And his strength, too. 2 years earlier he had hurt his spine again and bumped his head badly. It was caused by a bad climb. Harris fell from a high cliff and almost died. Doctors have been trying to revive him all this time, but so far they have been unsuccessful. The equipment shows that all of his vital organs work perfectly, but he does not come to his senses. His family is beginning to lose hope for a good outcome, but we're doing everything we can to make Harris well, shared the story of his patient Ella. Kelly comes to the hospital about 3 times a week. More often, Grandpa is visited by his grandson. They require that all doctor's orders be followed and that the patient be carefully cared for. I understand and will do as I have to, assured Ella Stacy, but I'll be back at 3 p.m. sharp. The girl said
Goodbye
to Ella and left the room. She couldn't wait to visit her grandmother and tell her about her new job. Melinda listened to her granddaughter, but was concerned that because of her job, she would not be able to study properly and prepare for practicals. Don't worry, Grandma, Stacy reassured the older woman, I'll get everything done. You know, I'll be able to study for my classes at work. It's not like I have to run drips and run errands all the time. When I get a free minute, I'll read my books and study for my classes. All right, Melinda agreed, it's never too late to quit my job if it gets tough. Stacy was happy and very grateful to Brett for helping her find a job. Now the girl was sure that she would be able to pay for part of her grandmother's surgery after her first paycheck. Judging by the kind of money she was going to be paid for her work, her patient was far from a poor man. September came, and with it college classes. Stacy ran to class in the morning and then to the hospital to see her patient. Changing Ella's post, she gave Harris IVs and all her other appointments. Before she left, she wiped the man's face and shoulders with a damp towel. The girl had heard that patients like her patient needed to be talked to, so she never did her job silently. She was constantly talking to Gordon. Sometimes it seemed to her that the man could hear her and would surely recover soon. Looking at Harris, she tried to guess what kind of character he was. Somehow she decided that the man who was now immobile and lying in a hospital bed was a serious, moderately demanding, fair, and kind man. Stacy didn't know why, but she liked Gordon. After work, she had time to run over to her grandmother's house and bring her some fruit and necessities. After talking with the attending physician, Stacy realized that the surgery could not be postponed in any way. Her grandmother could have gotten worse, and then such surgical intervention was out of the question. So after the paycheck, the girl signed all the necessary documents and paid the first amount for the treatment. A few days later, the grandmother was to be transferred to another department and prepared for surgery. Every evening Brett accompanied Stacy to her dormitory. The girl realized that she was falling more and more in love with him. Brett couldn't wait to tell Stacy the truth about himself, but each time something stopped him, and he postponed the conversation until the next day. One day, while in his elderly patient's room, Stacy witnessed a not-so-pleasant scene. Kelly came to visit Harris with a man she didn't know in his 50s. They were talking loudly and asked Stacy to leave the room for a while. The girl sat outside the door and couldn't help but hear her patient's visitors talking loudly. "I can't take it anymore, Kelly. How much longer can you drag it out?" the man said indignantly. "What do you usually do with patients like this? They can't stay in the hospital forever. Let's ask him to be moved to a home, and then we can do what we want with him." "Stop it, Chuck," the woman ordered him, "be patient. There's no other way out yet. I think my father-in-law will pass away without our help." "But how long can we wait?" the stranger continued to resent him. "Just wait a little longer, Kelly continued to reassure him, "You'll see, soon everything will be just the way we want it. I'll make it the way you want it." Then they moved on to whispering, and Stacy heard nothing more. But even from this brief conversation, she realized that Gordon's relatives were not eager to cure him. The only thing they are interested in is money, which now for some reason they cannot dispose of. After the unpleasant guests left, the girl sat by the patient's bedside for a long time, stroking his hand and talking to him. "That's all right, Harris, don't get upset. You will surely get well. No one can do you any harm," she whispered softly to her elderly patient. The next evening Stacy had to leave Gordon alone in the room for a while to pick up some clean laundry. When she returned, she noticed that the blanket she had covered Harris with was not the same as it had been before she left. Realizing nothing, she covered the man and continued her duties. A few days later she noticed again that something strange was happening with the patient. Now the blanket was slipping on the floor. Now the man's hands were changing their position. The girl began to suspect that her patient was regaining consciousness, but was trying to hide it as much as possible. To test her suspicions, the girl decides to ask the man. "Harris, I think you can hear me and even move," the girl whispered shyly. "If so, don't hide it from me." Stacy spoke and looked intently at Gordon. The man lay still. Not a muscle flickered on his face. The girl began to doubt her guess and wanted to get out of her chair, but flinched when she saw Harris's fingers move and his eyes open. The man looked at Stacy with sad eyes and remained silent. "So I was right," the girl was genuinely pleased. "Harris, you've come to your senses and now you'll be on the mend quickly." "Only no one must know about it yet," said Gordon quietly. "If my sister-in-law finds out, I shall be in danger. She'll do anything to send me to the afterlife. I'm surprised she hasn't done it before." Stacy listened to Harris and was not surprised by his words. She had been working as a caregiver for the second month, and in that time she had managed to learn a lot. "How long have you been coming around?" inquired Stacy. "I've been pretending not to hear or feel anything for 2 months now," Gordon admitted. "Believe me, Stacy, I have enough ill-wishers around me who would not benefit from my resurrection. I can't think of another word for it. While I can talk and hear and see, my legs don't listen to me very well. I can barely move them. So I am powerless against my enemies. In all the time you have been caring for me, I have been able to get to know you well. You are a kind and fair girl, so I dared to talk to you. Besides, you yourself have noticed that I am pretending. So you could hear and see everything when I first came to look after you," said Stacy, surprised. "It was too late for me to notice that you were on the mend." "Yes, I had to pretend," replied the man. "You know, Stacy, when you lie there like that and can't do anything, you get scared for your life, especially when you know a lot of interesting things about your relatives. As it turns out, some of them aren't very clean-cut and only think about getting all my money." "But why did you decide to tell me about all this?" Stacy continued to question. "I can hardly help you." "That's where you're wrong. I couldn't be wrong about you. Stacy, you're a brave and honest girl. No one can help me now but you," assured Gordon. "You and I will make a plan together. Will you be willing to do my errands?" "It depends on what kind of errands we're talking about," answered the girl uncertainly. "But for that I must know about everything that happens, who you are so afraid of and how I can be useful to you." "Of course. I'll tell you about everything. You've already met my sister-in-law Kelly. My name is known to many people in our town. I own a chain of hotels. I started my business from scratch. I thought I would pass it on to my son, but he died 10 years ago. When that happened, I wrote a will saying that in the event of my death I would give the whole business to my only grandson. Until he came of age I hoped to run the business myself, and in case of emergencies my daughter-in-law Kelly was to run the business. As it happens, 2 years ago I was seriously injured. You already know what caused it. I don't understand how it could have happened. All the cables were intact. I was provided with good insurance as usual, but the ropes broke and I lay unconscious in this room for almost 2 years. All my affairs were taken over by Kelly. She had never burned for the business, but she understood that if she didn't take the job she might lose everything she had, and she loved to live beautifully. So she was looking forward to handing over all the business to her son. But Brett is still young and is just now starting to get into the business of the family business. But that's not the main problem. I don't know how long ago Kelly had a lover. They're so cocky that sometimes they even visit me in this room together. His name is Chuck. Stupid Kelly introduced him to my entire business, and now he is doing everything to get the business, which in fact now has no real owner. I've already been written off by him. Kelly's got me fooled. And what he's going to do with Brett, I don't know yet, but I'm scared for my grandson. My sister-in-law probably thinks Chuck is going to stay with her when he starts running our business, but I know that's not going to happen. I think I know who you're talking about, Stacy guessed. This man came into the hospital with Kelly once, and I overheard them talking. The door was ajar and they were talking pretty loud. That's right, Gordon replied, that's Chuck, Kelly's lover. He took a job with me a long time ago. He used to be the most ordinary office worker in the marketing department. Now he's the head of one of the biggest hotels. That's the gift my sister-in-law gave him, not realizing what an insidious snake she had nestled in her bosom. He wants to get his hands on the whole fortune, but how to do it, he does not know yet. I am powerless to do anything. That's all right, I'll help you. First of all, medically. We'll start to work on your legs, do massages. Tell me, right now you can't move them at all? I can move them, but I probably can't stand, the man replied, my legs don't want to listen to me. I think that can be fixed. I just have to see my doctor and have him adjust the treatment, suggested Stacy. Absolutely not. Let the treatment continue as prescribed. I repeat, don't trust anyone, not even the doctor. It's dangerous, Gordon said and froze abruptly. A cleaning lady entered the room, followed by Kelly. She placed her bag on the table and approached her father-in-law. Stacy, I thought you were talking to someone, the woman asked questioningly. Yes, I often talk to Harris, replied Stacy, trying not to be nervous. They say you should talk to these patients. It makes them heal quickly. Don't talk nonsense, grinned Kelly, my father-in-law can't hear anyone or anything. I don't know how much longer he'll be like that. Though, if you want to, you can talk, I don't forbid it. After a few more minutes in the room, the woman disappeared behind the door. The cleaning lady also finished her business, looked at Stacy with a sneer, and closed the door behind her. It seemed to the girl that her hands were shaking from nerves, and a perspiration appeared on her forehead. Stop fidgeting, Gordon addressed her calmly when they were alone in the room. Stacy looked at her patient and marveled at his equanimity. How do you manage to act so naturally? She turned to him. You'll learn everything if you want to live. All right, come on, let's go home. It's past your time on duty. Why did Kelly have to come over? She's always dropping in for a few minutes, whether it's for decorum or to see if I'm alive. Did you notice the indifference with which she looks at me and talks about my recovery? Yes, it's not very nice to listen to her, the girl agreed. Good night, Harris. I'll come and see you tomorrow at 3 p.m. sharp, and you and I will decide what we will do next. After saying goodbye to Gordon, Stacy walked out of the hospital building. As always, she met Brett in the courtyard. It was getting cold outside, and Stacy's jacket was completely out of season. They made their way quickly to the bus stop and told each other about their day. Stacy had had many surprises, but she had not told Brett about any of them. When she reached the dormitory, the first thing she did was to open her laptop and start searching for information about the Gordons. What was her surprise when she saw a picture of Brett on the internet? Her Brett, whom she had known for months, turned out to be none other than the grandson of Gordon, the owner of a multi-million-dollar fortune. Barely surviving a sleepless night, Stacy ran to her dorm room class in the morning. She lived alone for the time being. Daisy had moved in to live with her groom. No one was moved in to take her place. At classes, the girl only pretended to listen to the lecture of the teacher. In fact, there were a lot of questions swirling around in her head. The main one was about Brett. The girl could not understand why he did not confess who he really was the whole time they had met. The longer she thought about yesterday's conversation with Harris, the more she realized that the man she loved was in danger. Brett is 20 years old. Soon he would be a full owner of his grandfather's business. So Chuck has begun to act to get him out of his way. How exactly is he going to do that? The girl decides to talk to Brett and tell him what she has learned about who he really is. But what about Harris? He asked her not to tell anyone yet that he had come to his senses. The heavy thoughts made the girl dizzy. It seemed to Stacy that a little more and she would stop thinking. After studying, Stacy hurried to the hospital. On the way, she dialed Brett's number several times, but he never answered. Deciding that the young man was busy with something and didn't hear her calls, the girl went up to her grandmother's room. "Stacy. Here you are. I have wonderful news. In a couple of days, I am going to have an operation. I hope I can get out of this bed soon and not be a burden to you," Melinda reported. "What are you talking about?" said Stacy reproachfully. "You have never been and never will be a burden to me. You are my nearest and dearest person. I have no one else in this world but you." "Of course, granddaughter, you're right. But anything can happen. The doctors do not say anything specific, so I am prepared for any outcome of the operation. In any case, know that our cottage in the village I will inherit to you. After I die, you can sell it. It may not be worth a lot of money, but it will still help you buy your own home," the woman explained. "Grandmother, don't say any worse things. You'll live many, many years, and we'll be all right," Stacy tried to persuade her. "How are things with you and Brett? Is he still courting you?" said Melinda, turning the conversation to another subject. "Yes, Brett is wonderful. He meets me outside the hospital every day at the end of my shift. But school and work have been very demanding lately." "And who's your patient? You said he hasn't been coming around for a long time." "He's a wonderful man. He was into mountain climbing. 2 years ago the rope that was insuring him suddenly broke and he was very badly injured. The doctors haven't made any positive predictions yet."
Yeah,
That's what dangerous hobbies can lead to. I had an acquaintance who was also into mountain climbing. We were very young then and didn't think about the dangers. It seemed that we would live forever, Melinda remembered and smiled. It seemed to Stacy that her grandmother remembered something pleasant and did not distract her with other conversations. When she fell asleep, the girl left the room and went to the head doctor of the ward, reported that she was ready to make the second payment for the operation, and learned that her grandmother would be operated on in 2 days. Harris's room was quiet and peaceful. The man lay with his eyes closed. Stacy thought he was asleep, but Gordon opened his eyes and smiled slightly. "Stacy, good to see you," he greeted the girl. "I'm so glad you call me that." "You're the only one who calls me that," the girl admitted and stroked the older man's hand. "You know, Kelly came by this morning. She persuaded the doctor to move me home from the hospital." Gordon broke the news. "I'm afraid she has succumbed to persuasion. I beg you very much, please stay by my side and keep an eye on everything that goes on in the house. You can expect anything from Chuck." "Understood." "Stay calm," Stacy assured her elderly patient. "I'll be there and do everything I can to keep you away from this man." An hour later, Kelly arrived again. She arranged for Stacy to pack up all of Gordon's belongings in a bag. 2 paramedics loaded the elderly man into a wheelchair and took him to the ambulance. An hour and a half later, Gordon, accompanied by his young nurse, was taken home, where a special room had already been prepared for him. To her surprise, Stacy met Chuck in the house, who behaved like a host, constantly admonishing the arriving paramedics as they moved Gordon to his new room. "Stacy, I would like you to be near my father-in-law at all times. I promise to pay you triple that." Kelly made an unexpected offer when all the hassle of the move was behind me. That proposal made Stacy freeze in place. What has come over Kelly? And what to answer her? We will find it out in the next video.